Hello, this is meteorologist Brad Warner from Region Weather Live, and boy, we just haven't had a whole lot to talk about lately across the region. We've had a few light dustings here and there, nothing really to get too excited about. Got some roads that maybe deteriorated a little bit, but we just haven't had the big, large storms that come through. Now, we do have an area that is expected to move across South Dakota, southern parts of North Dakota, and into Minnesota as we get into late Friday and into Saturday. But unfortunately, as we get closer to this time frame, it looks like the models continue to kind of back off on the amount of snowfall expected with this storm system. So we're going to take a look at what's really going on and explain to you why that is occurring and why I think we might actually get a little bit less snow than we were previously thinking. If you take a look at the current conditions right now, and you can see plenty of cold air up here in the single digits to even below zero up here in the far northwest. So plenty of cold air sinking into our area. Now, you can see a little bit warmer air to the south as we have the 20s. And right in between that is where we have our watches currently. So at the moment, what we're looking at is we have a winter storm watch across northeastern portions of South Dakota, and then stretching across west central Minnesota down to the southeast. Right now, that's valid from about Friday, late Friday afternoon, and continuing on into Saturday afternoon. A little bit further to the west, we have a winter weather advisory, and that's in effect for Friday morning and continuing on into the early parts of Saturday morning. So that's kind of the watches that are currently out across our area. Now, setup-wise, at the upper levels here, we've got a pretty strong jet slamming on board and kind of making a bit of a ridge and then diving down into the central parts of the United States and kind of into the Midwest. But our upper level portion of this system is very subtle. It's this weak little wave right here. I'm not talking about this big part, but rather that first one, that first little wave here that is just moving on shore here by Friday morning, and that's continuing to push eastward and kind of flatten this ridge out as we get into Friday night and into Saturday morning. Again, very, very subtle. You can see how that kind of flattens that ridge out just a bit. And essentially, that's the little bit of some of the weather maker, the upper level pattern that's kicking off our storm system. And so it's very subtle. Normally, when we have a larger storm system, we have a big, deep trough out here with that upper level jet kind of blasting off to the northeast like that. And these big storms pull out of the Rockies and move off to the northeast along with it. And as you can see, that's just not quite the setup that we have. And so that's part one of the concern that we've got going when I mentioned that the weather model's been pulling back on some of the accumulations that is expected out of this storm. Well, there you have it. That upper level flow just isn't really conducive of that real heavy type of snow that we expect out of the ejecting Colorado lows. Now, as we go further or lower down into the atmosphere, we're getting about 5,000 feet. The other thing we need is a good fetch of moisture off from the Gulf Coast and moving all that moisture up into our region. Now, here we are. We're at Friday morning. And we don't really have that flow yet. We've got a little bit, but it's not really drawing that moisture into our area. And as we go through the day on Friday and get into Friday evening, even at that, we've got somewhat of a flow coming off, and then it rides off to the north and east. Perhaps a little bit of a jet streak that helps things get going a little bit in the overnight hours, Friday night and into Saturday morning. But really, the flow just doesn't really develop all that well for this storm. In fact, you can see overnight, we have a low-level jet that kind of pops up across the southern portions of the United States, and that's probably going to set off some rain and some thunderstorms that will ultimately rob some of the moisture further to the north. And finally, when we take a look at some of the moisture here down further to the south, you can see it doesn't really make it that far north until we get perhaps, as we get into Saturday morning, it kind of starts to get a little bit further north. But ultimately, as we back this up a little bit, you can see most of the moisture kind of rides over the Rockies and settles down across our area. So we're lacking that good fetch of moisture. into this system. So here we are at the surface level, that low pressure system just moving in through the Rockies through the daytime on Friday, and then ejects out into kind of the Wyoming, Colorado area by Friday evening, and that's where we're starting to see the snow across the North Dakota, South Dakota border and extend into parts of Minnesota. And then as the system continues to kind of dip down to the south a little bit and then ejects off to the east and northeast, that snow continues to move across Minnesota into Wisconsin. Then we've got rain, some thunderstorms, some sleet, some freezing rain moving into the Midwest in the Great Lakes region, and then eventually crashing into the northeastern part of the United States, where we're looking at probably some pretty good freezing rain, thunderstorms, and some heavy snow as that system ejects out of the East Coast. Now, also notice behind this is this big high pressure system that pushes quickly in behind it. Some drier air really gets settled in fast. So that's the other aspect of this, is as that low pressure moves on through, we do have this high pressure that really tries to dry things out from the north, again, kind of limiting some of that snowfall potential as the system moves through. And not only that, as that does eject out in this system, or this high pressure does sag further to the south, it's also going to be drawing with it some colder temperatures. All right, timing wise, kind of what we're looking at right now. This is Friday afternoon. You can see some snow, some light snow moving across western parts of the Dakotas here. Perhaps a little bit of light stuff down further to the south and west of this as well before this. So you could get a little bit of light dusting there as well. But for the most part, it looks like things really don't get going until we get more into the evening hours. This is around 6 to 7 p.m. time frame. And that's when the snow really begins to kind of move through our area. You can see at this point, perhaps some moderate to maybe even some heavy snow across northwestern parts of South Dakota as we get into that overnight hours. Now, moving this along, this is around 9-10 p.m. That snow now begins to move into west central parts of Minnesota. Some snow back down to the southwest again and across portions of, or at least southern half of North Dakota. And by the midnight time frame, we're looking at that snow now moving into the Minneapolis area and just moving into Wisconsin and still remaining back across southern parts of North Dakota and across a good chunk of South Dakota by this point. And as we get into that midnight time frame, we've got perhaps a few little areas of snow that might be just a little bit heavier than the rest. Now, this is roughly about the time frame when some of that southern moisture begins to kind of move into the area. So it's possible as we get into the early parts of Saturday morning, this is 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning, this is around 6 to 7 in the morning, that maybe some of this could just fire up just a little bit more right before essentially the snow moves off to the east. So as we get into the early morning hour Saturday, we've got that potential maybe that maybe the snow might pick up a little bit from a light to kind of a light to moderate type of snow just before it exits out on Saturday. So this is around 9 to 10 p.m. and this is around noon to 1 p.m. And so by this point, we're looking at the back edge of the snow now, just across southeastern parts of Minnesota. Look at that high pressure really begin to sink in and dry all this area out, pushing the snow off to the south and east. So it looks like as we get into Saturday afternoon, most of that snow will have moved out of our region, and we're just going to be left with the colder conditions. All right, how much snow are we talking? Well, in the blue here, the darker blue, we're looking at a trace to maybe 2 inches of snow. You can see kind of that far northern edge just kind of reaches up along the Highway 2 area up to Bemidji, kind of sags a little bit further south to Hillsborough through Cooperstown, up through Garrison, essentially just south of Williston, and then covers most of the southern parts of our area. Now the 2 to 4 kind of from Duluth to Fargo to maybe just north of Bismarck, running right through Dickinson, and then it kind of dips south of Rapid City and kind of up through Pierre, perhaps kind of dipsy-does down to the south and west a little bit, but then kind of comes back up through Watertown, comes up to Mankato, and then back down to Rochester. Now, for the most part, I'm pretty confident in that 2 to 4 mark in through this area. I think that's probably a pretty accurate depiction of where at least the best chance for seeing some accumulating snow will be, right in through that region. Now we do have this area that I've marked in through here of kind of this purplish area of 4 to 6 inches, and I'm a little getting more and more leery of that as time goes along. As I said, the models continue to draw back on the amount of snowfall that's expected. There's just a lot of things going against this. So this area in purple, I think a pretty good chance that you're going to see 4 inches. And I think the 6-inch mark probably is going to be the high portion of that area. And I really am kind of starting to doubt that 6-inch mark. I really think most of it's going to be closer to 4, maybe 5 inches. It just impresses me less and less as we get closer to the actual time frame of this storm. And I'm kind of hesitating to even show this pink area in through here, where maybe we could get a little more than 6 inches. In between the two here, if I had to pick the area that's most likely to see a little more than 6 inches, I'd probably pick this area across the Twin Cities. But gosh, I really think, guys, this is going to be 4 to maybe 6 inch range, the way this is panning out. And then the other area of concern is in this yellow marked area in through here, because we do have that high pressure system really sagging south. I'm kind of concerned that the northern edge of this snowfall line could push even a little bit further south, because that high pressure system is going to be drawing in some more drier air than perhaps the model's really picking up on. So included kind of that area in through here for just an area to watch, that perhaps you might actually see a little bit less snow than what's in this forecast. So I'm sorry if I'm a little bit wishy-washy here. Ultimately, here is my final forecast, and I'll make sure to have that up on my social media sites as well. So be sure to take a look on that so you can get a little bit closer look as to what I'm thinking. Now, unfortunately, as I said, we're expecting some colder air to move in behind the system, and especially as we get into Monday and Tuesday, this is kind of, again, right about 5,000 feet above the surface here, but you can see some of the colder air moving in out of Canada. Gives you a really good look of some of that cold air that's expected to sweep on through Monday and Tuesday. A little bit of a rebound, perhaps, as we get into Wednesday. But really, that cold air continues to linger, especially far across the north throughout much of next week. To give you a little bit of an idea of what the models are showing for high temperatures, this is Tuesday. Most areas are going to struggle to get above freezing. As we get into Wednesday, again, more of that across the north, where we're looking at 5 to 10 below. And mind you, this is for high temperatures, and that's not even the low temperatures. Of course, the low temperatures are going to be even colder than that as we get into Thursday and Friday. And like I said, just not much relief as we go throughout next week. And especially if you live across the northern portions of our area, some of the southern portions could warm up a little bit by next weekend, the teens and 20s, but gosh, we just don't have much of a reprieve. This sucker settles in, and that means it's going to be kind of boring too. We don't see a lot of snowfall in the forecast beyond this system that's moving through. Cold temperatures settle in. You don't typically get a ton of snow, but if that changes, if there is a change in the forecast and it looks like there's a bigger storm system on the way, make sure you tune in. So if you haven't done so already, subscribe down below, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell button so that you're notified when I've uploaded another video just like this. I'll make sure to put the videos up when there are the larger storms coming through across the winter. And then, of course, as we get closer to spring and summer, hopefully we'll have more to talk about when it comes to severe weather. All right, everybody, I'm meteorologist Brad Warner for Region Weather Live. Everybody have a good day.